how to put themselves in the position to capture more lucky opportunities like that?
Man, I think there are a lot of ways to increase your chances for those. But the first one that comes to mind is...
Welcome to Hello Grow,
Utah's #1 growth podcast.
I'm Court Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza.
And today we have MicroSaaS master, digital marketer, 100,000 subscriber YouTube channel, and cancer survivor, Payton Smith with us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Stoked to have you, Pate.
It's going to be good.
We've, Pate, you and I have known each other since like 15 years now, almost.
Since college.
I knew you before you knew me because you're on your mission.
Yeah, you guys welcomed me right when I got back. You had a full apartment, ready to party, so it was fun.
With that beautiful Jeep.
Yeah,
You didn't know what
that's
to do with yourself coming
New
from
Jeep. Yeah, you guys broke me in real fast.
coming from Mexico, Texas. They didn't really have any
Yeah.
Jeeps.
Seriously.
Well, dude, stoked to have you in here. Today we're going to go through your story, which has a few twists and turns, and we're going to get deep into your MicroSaaS. We're going to focus a ton on that and how people can find their niche, how they can figure out how to capitalize their business from a financial perspective and get funding, and then also how to manage their team. We're also going to talk about some of the hurdles that you had to overcome, some of which were probably typical to most business founders as just business hurdles, but some that were unique to you in going through cancer and having a sister-in-law who also went through cancer. So I'd like to dive into that a little bit. Just starting out, tell us how you went from, so we met, did door-to-door sales together, we're roommates in college together, and a couple of years later, you have a few MicroSaaS crushing companies. Can you just give us, I know it's a long period of time, but tell us the story.
Yeah, so back in college when we were selling together, I was trying to convince myself that that's what I wanted to do, right? That was like my thing, and it wasn't fully clicking for me, but I really enjoyed the people. I enjoyed kind of that whole team vibe, but something was kind of missing for me. So as I got back to college, I was trying a couple different classes, looking for things that interested me. And the only things that really were more of like the creative type classes. Like I was in some design classes, some different web design classes, and I've always been like a creative person, but in my mind that was never something that was going to pay the bills or something that could even be like a career possibility. So as I got deeper into those classes, there was actually one class that really kind of rocked me. It was a business class, but through the process of this, you had to brand this business, come up with a logo, a name, a website. You had to set up the payment process, or basically have the whole thing like ready to function as a real business. And it fascinated me. I was so addicted to that whole process, and I immediately forgot about all my other classes. I focused fully on that one. I don't even think I got a good grade in that class because I would get so sidetracked building my own different websites and things. And so that kind of started this snowball effect where I was, trying different design and development tools and just anything I could find on YouTube, right, about this world of websites and marketing. And before I knew it, I was offering websites as like a freelancer, something on the side that I was doing. In fact, you were one of my first kind of side projects to build the
original Aspen website.
Yeah.
And that thing was
Payton
rough,
Smith.
man.
That was a good-looking website.
No, it's funny when I look back on those because they weren't, like, I'm embarrassed of most of them, but it's fun to see how far it's come because back then, like, I just didn't know what I was doing, but I know, like, there was something there, right?
We can attribute 90% of our company's success to that website. So I need to write you a bigger check than what I wrote you.
Man. I'm sure at the time you paid me way more than I was worth.
Yeah, right.
Maybe a couple $100, I don't know. But those experiences really just allowed me to it accelerated my learning through all of this. And so as I was designing those websites, like I was getting close to the end of college and stressed about finding a job, or I still thought I would have to choose some sort of development career or something. And a few weeks before graduation, somebody paid me like $3,000 for a website, and I just told my wife, I was like, this is what I'm gonna do. Like I'm just gonna stay here in our apartment on my laptop and make this thing work. And so I don't even think I went to my own graduation. I was just like so checked out already that just kept working. We stayed in that apartment. I kept hustling, and then that freelance business grew into an agency. We started offering SEO services, Google Ads services. I very quickly realized that there were parts of running an agency that were really like detail oriented and really technical, and I hated that stuff because I've always been kind of a scatterbrained, more of a creative brain, and so I found a team overseas to do all of our SEO stuff for our clients, and I hired an SEO manager, and I hired an executive assistant, and we started growing that agency. And so that agency was, at the time, what I thought was going to be my thing. It really just ended up being what would fund what I found to be my real passions, which were YouTube. I started a YouTube channel a few years in, which now takes up the majority of my time. From YouTube, I've created, online education courses, like a community, a private community. And then all of those things, I've tried to find ways to like weave them all together so they seem like one like cohesive unit. But all of that experience kind of just led me into software or SaaS, because I realized all the pain points from all those different businesses could be solved by a software. You don't have to deal with angry clients. There's way less management. There's virtually no overhead. Like all of these issues were solved. And so I've slowly let those other things not completely die out, but they've taken less priority as I've focused more on the software. And that's where I'm at right now.
It's amazing. I have a couple questions for you in that journey. First, congratulations on being I think you're the only roommate that actually graduated. So my hats off to
I might be, actually.
None of us went to our own graduation, but you were the only one that actually was invited to go to your own graduation.
That's an honor.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about the business, but before that, there's this internal dialogue when you have a successful career. You're already making six figures, doing sales, leading teams of salespeople. Can you talk a little bit about the internal dialogue that you went through and some of the conflict that existed in your mind where you said, I'm going to step away from these golden handcuffs and go out on my own?
I really like that question because sales was a really good job. And the thing that made it even more difficult to leave was all of my best friends were still there. And a lot of them were killing it and making great money and building huge teams. But for me, I don't know if I ever doubted that decision, mainly because I have always been the type of person that I can't fake it when I don't have passion in something. And I tried my very best at sales and sold for 4 or 5 years and loved it and had a team. But at the end, when it was time to make that decision, I just kind of knew that my heart wasn't fully in it. And so choosing something that really excited me was the easy choice, even if it paid less. And so I think that decision just took me those several years to finally get the courage to make. But once I did, there was no turning back. Even though I was making way less, I just felt like I was doing my thing, like the thing I was supposed to be doing.
Do you wish you would have pulled the trigger earlier or later?
Yes and no. I think we all wish we could have started earlier, right? I would be so much further down the road, but those years of selling taught me a lot as well that has helped me, especially when it comes to creating content and closing clients. And I can think back to some of my biggest clients that I've closed, and I'm like, man, I was using lines directly from the doors. Like, it's funny how that stuff translates over. So I don't necessarily think I wish I would have left earlier or stayed later. I kind of think that if you're just chasing what you love to do, I think the timing kind of always works out the way it's supposed to, especially lining up with, when I met my wife and when I got married and had our first kid. Like, all of that sales stuff really helped us through those times, and the timing was perfect for me to leave and start my own thing. And so I'm actually really grateful that things lined up the way that they did, and I probably wouldn't change anything.
Tell me, it always sounds more simple than it is, and it's always more messy than it sounds. Tell us some of the headaches that you ran into when you first tried to build the system of some overseas employees.
I think I was luckier than most. The way that I found my team was actually through a friend that we sold with, Garrett. He connected me with somebody that already had this SEO team that was trained, and he was just winding down his business. So I basically adopted that team, which was really nice, but it didn't solve all issues, right? There still was a lot of communication issues as far as what the clients wanted and needed and what I expected. And there were a lot of times where I would still end up having to play the go-between and do the communication with the client. And so those were issues early on, but I think we solved a lot of those by hiring to fill the gaps rather than me immediately jumping in and filling those gaps, or allowing them to make those mistakes and they would fill those gaps themselves, which I think really showed me early on that they were a great team and that I could trust them. I just had to give them a chance.
I love the concept of, Jim Collins talks about this in Great by Choice, and it's this concept of return on luck. Instead of return on your investment, it's your return on luck. There's tons of other people that could have adopted that SEO team, but you set yourself up by doing the door-to-door sales, having a business that was ready to go, that you could live off the savings that you had already created to go and capture that team. So yeah, you say it's lucky, but you captured a phenomenal return on that luck that was created.
I love that. And I think almost every step of my career has been filled with quite a bit of luck. And I do think that happens when you put yourself in the right position, but also I think there are, you're blessed by people around you, friends and family, and there are a lot of people like that play a huge role in that luck as well in providing those opportunities.
So tell us what MicroSaaS is. Someone, that's the first time they're hearing that concept. How would you describe it?
Yeah, it's something that I didn't know about until probably 3 or 4 years ago. So SaaS stands for software as a service. And so most of us in our businesses are using some type of SaaS where you pay a monthly subscription to use some sort of digital service, right? So I'm using Slack and Zoom and all of these softwares that help me run my business. And so a micro SaaS, essentially the idea of that is getting really specific and niching down on a very unique problem and then solving that with your software. And so rather than trying to recreate Zoom or Slack or some of these big softwares, I'm going to create something that does a lot less, but it does one specific thing really, really great. And then there are a lot of other things to play into that, finding ways to make it easier to use and less complicated and more affordable. And those are all things that lend to a successful micro SaaS, because then your marketing and your messaging is so specific. Rather than telling people, hey, we do it all, we're saying we can solve that one tiny problem that you have, and it makes it a no-brainer for people that are a good fit or are an ideal user for your software.
And what is you've explained it to me a couple of times, and I know it's for digital marketers, but describe what your MicroSaaS, you have 2 of them, right?
We have one that has not yet launched.
Okay.
So we've just gone through the beta process. So my one that has been top priority for the last year and a half probably is an SEO site optimizer. And so the way that this works is, if you've ever built a site on WordPress is the big site builder, and there's a plugin called Yoast, which tells you all the different changes and tweaks you need to make on your website so it has a better chance of ranking on Google.
Yoast would be a MicroSaaS.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So a big micro SaaS.
Okay.
So it also could be considered a plugin or an app, which oftentimes these things are. So a tool that I've always used to build websites for the past 5 years is called Webflow, and it's a really fast-growing web design and development platform. And I was really involved in that. I was a partner there. We were like a certified agency, and it just bugged me that there wasn't an SEO tool or an app that worked in Webflow. And so at the time, there was no app marketplace. There were no plugins for Webflow. So we actually built a Google Chrome extension that would overlay over Webflow, and it would feel like it was part of the interface, even though it wasn't. And so we kind of hacked our way into this tool at first, and people really liked it. It got really great feedback, and there were a lot of bugs because of the way we had to set it up. But the timing was perfect because about 6 months after we launched that Chrome extension, Webflow messaged everybody and said, hey, I think we're going to do an app marketplace. So everybody start thinking about the apps you want to build. We were already there. Like, we already had our thing set up. We just had to press a few buttons, and it was an app, and we were one of the first ones to launch on the marketplace. And again, some luck that worked in our favor.
It's similar to Aspen. We built remote and video inspections in 2019. Then COVID hits, and no one's allowed to go on site. Like, what do we do? What's the solution? And like, oh, how lucky are we that we had this remote inspection tool that we didn't have to go on site to appraise assets. And I think the learnings is that when it gets announced, it's probably too late. Like, you've already lost it. When you hear about the great investment, when you're watching the news, like, that's the worst time to invest because you already missed the wave. How do you encourage founders? How would you advise founders on how to put themselves in the position to capture more lucky opportunities like that?
Man, I think there are a lot of ways to increase your chances for those. But the first one that comes to mind is not being afraid to try new things. I think so many times it can seem nervous to like step into a new arena that you're not familiar with. But even if there's a little bit of like expertise overlap, it's worth trying, right? And I had already built an audience in this realm, and so it didn't seem like too big of a jump to try to build an app there. But had I not been willing to try these different things, because I had tried several other things that failed, but this app just ended up being the one that was lucky. And I think you just got to put yourself out there. The other thing that I would say, and again, I think that everything can happen for good or for bad, depending on how you look at it and approach it and how you let it affect you. And one of the things we might talk about, but was my battle with cancer. I was diagnosed at the end of 2021, and I was too sick to work. I didn't get any work done. And in my mind, I just thought, I'm falling behind. But it was during chemo that I had the idea. And I didn't even get started with it until I was done with chemo. But I look back now and think there was so much good that came out of that. And I'm so grateful for that. And I want to choose to see the good that came from it. And so sometimes it takes, a trial, or I don't know, somebody maybe losing their job or losing a loved one or something to shift direction in their life. But looking for ways to pull the good out of that, I think, is oftentimes when those good opportunities or lucky opportunities come to us. But if you're just kind of down and out and shut down and not looking for the positive, you might miss a lot of those.
I have a follow-up question on you. You talked about, continue to explore and try new things. For you, what is the right balance between that of trying new things and mastering what you're good at first? Because I feel like I'm always in this limbo. Like, should we go to the next vertical, or should we try to get better? Because you just have so much and so many resources, right, that you can spend. For you, what is the right balance there?
I think for some people it can be good to try several different things and have a lot of different products and businesses. And for some it can be good, and for some it can just stunt the growth of their one thing. I think for me, I wouldn't say my passion or my skills are best used in SEO or dealing with clients or even creating content. But for me, I love just creating cool businesses and products. And so that seems like my single skill or vertical. And so that makes it easy to try different things using that skill. I would also say trying to find ways to, rather than going in 10 different directions, find things that are still somewhat headed in the same direction and can help and support one another. And so I've tried to do that, even though I do have courses and software and an agency and a YouTube channel. All of these things can cross promote, and when somebody uses one, chances are they're a good fit for another, and it works with upsells and downsells. And so I would say trying to stick within one vertical, and then it's okay to get a little crazy and kind of break outside the boundaries of that a little bit, as long as you don't get to the point where you're just stretching yourself too thin.
Yeah.
Chandler sent me this video the other day of Jerry Seinfeld, and he said, What kind of life is this? What life are we living? What kind of life is this?" And then underneath it said, "Founders that just realized that they have to put out social media content." I was wondering if you could talk. What are the founders that must be putting out content, and those that can get away, without putting out content?
I can't think of any that can get away with not doing it, quite frankly. I think it's so important. I think people trust personal, like singular one-person brands more than they trust companies, more than they trust ads, more than they trust the Google search rankings. Like, people like to buy from people that they see and hear and know. And the cool thing about this big wave of everyone creating content is I know people that have 500 followers or 500 subs that are absolutely killing it. And so it's not this game of who can have the most, or you have to have 1 million in order to, to blow up your business. But again, having these kind of micro followings, same concept as a MicroSaaS. It's like really digging into your niche and what you're good at and what you love, and then creating very specific content. It's such a great opportunity. But if you're not doing it, chances are in your industry there's somebody that is, and people are going to want to buy from them because they're being seen.
I have a question for a friend. This guy right here. But so let's say that you've never put out content, but you are a founder. When should you choose to do it yourself, or focus on building the business, and then later I can outsource this content creation to a influencer or an agency? What are the benefits and does my question make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I think it just depends on the person. I think everybody does it differently. I know creators that have 1 million plus subs, and they do all of the filming, editing, optimizing, posting themselves. And it's because that's their thing, and they are good at it, and they like to control all of that. There are also people like the Hormozis of the world that are spending $40,000 a month just on their content team. And it really just depends on how busy you are, where you feel like your time is best spent. For me, my main priority is my personal brand, and down to every detail of how the thumbnail looks. And so for me, it's worth doing as much of it myself as I can do without slacking off on my other responsibilities. But for some people, I also think that it's totally fine to film something like this, a podcast or a chat, and then send it to an editor overseas for $20 and get it clipped up and posted. Like, I don't think there's bad content. The only mistake that you can make is not posting at all, because even the most simple conversations, as long as there's just a sliver of value, people are going to hopefully find that. And even if they don't, you're getting that face time. And so if they see you posting, you're relevant, you're top of mind. And so whether you do it all yourself, whether you outsource it, you should try to be out there, at least once a day where somebody can see your face.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like it's ideal in a perfect world. If you are if that's your business, you should do it yourself. From personal experience, we at Aspen, I tried marketing agencies for a while. So I'll spend from $5,000 to $10,000 a month, ads, and they would create content for me. It never gained traction. We never gained traction. Then we decided to do it in-house, and I have a dedicated marketing person to all of that, and it's now we're gaining traction finally. To me, because of that experience, it always feels like no one's going to care about your business like you do. So it's ideally you always do it yourself and in-house, but there are certain scenarios where you don't have the time, the resources to do it in-house, so you let somebody else do it for you. But those are when you don't have the time or the resources to do it yourself. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, I think it's like with anything. It's always going to get done and be better if you do it yourself, but you've just got to kind of weigh that opportunity cost of like, what is this taking away from? Is there something else I could be doing that's more profitable? And sometimes there will be. I think content, even early on when you're only getting 10 views a video, it's still so worth it because it builds on itself. But yeah, I think just getting something out there, I think there are a lot of conversations on how much or how often, and it's just about posting, right?
I do have one more question there, which is super, it's kind of pivoting a little bit to more of a specific question about marketing and the creation. But working with marketing people, I always, there's a lot of creative people out there, but not so much, analytical skills. And it feels to me like there has to be a balance between creativity and the analytics side of creation and marketing. What would you say is the right balance for a marketer or an agency?
I would say both can be easily learned if you're truly invested in the channel or the brand, right? I had the creative side, but I didn't understand the analytics or, learning to grow on YouTube. Just YouTube alone is this whole universe of search engine optimizing and video optimizing and interlinking videos and all these things. And that's stuff that easily can be learned if you're really invested in that. So whether that's you or somebody that you hire, just making sure you have somebody that's invested and really tied to the success of that channel, I think you'll be just fine, right? There's a lot of great resources out there. And the other thing actually that just came back to me, that talking about a brand and doing it yourself, and those early months are so difficult to grow, right? It's difficult to get those views, and YouTube or whatever platform you're on, it's not serving your videos up. It's not bringing people to you. And so unless you're like actively, spamming your video out on your socials and, Facebook groups or whatever else people do, it feels like you're just not getting that traction. And one of the biggest struggles that people will have, especially early on, is trying to post too general of content. And I see so many people out there that are posting general like business advice or entrepreneurial advice. And that's a lot of what I do, right? Like business, but I found a niche where I'm talking business for web designers and agency owners. So just getting a little more specific, it's easier to optimize your videos. It's easier to find the right audience. And when people find you, you're not just another generalist. You are somebody that's speaking directly to their situation. So people that are creating general business content, there are so many out there that are never going to be found. But then the ones that I follow are, the stay-at-home dad and how he balances his work from home with his kids, right? Like that's a kind of a unique story or situation or something that, even though it's not unique for his brand, he's putting out content where in every video he's got his kid on his lap or he's out jumping on the tramp on a phone call, or fun content like that where it's like, man, he's saying the same thing as everybody else, but he's tweaked it to make it a little bit niche down, and he's grown like a wildfire. And so, especially in those early months, rather than saying, hey, I want to put out a video on how to hire people, I'm going to find some unique way to make this personal to me, personal to my story, my life, my experience. And that's something that can't be outsourced. You can't hire out that creative side of coming up with video ideas and filming and all of those different things. And so you've got to be truly bought into the content process. Otherwise, it's just going to be general content that gets posted and forgotten pretty quickly.
Right. Do you think it's better to start there? So find your niche and then start there, or start putting something out there and then continue to find your niche?
Either. If you don't have your niche yet, like, yeah, start posting content.
And
For me, I was lucky enough that I kind of already had my niche. So my first videos, if you look back on YouTube to my first videos, it was about like very specific tools. It was reviews on specific softwares. And so I was hitting off of those keywords of those, company names that were already getting searched. And so I was kind of piggybacking off of that rather than putting out general advice. So looking for ways to tie yourself to something that's relevant or unique or stands out. The best thing you can do with content is look at what everybody else is doing. If you have a video idea, search it into YouTube, go through the top 2 pages of searches, see which ones have views, which ones don't, pick the top 3, watch them, and then think, how can I copy these but make them slightly better, slightly longer, slightly more engaging, more snappy. And that's the content that I would create, because you know that it works. You know that that video has essentially all the right building blocks, and you're just going to find a way to put your spin on it and then post it.
I have one last question about this. It might be a dumb question, but 2024, millions of creators are already on YouTube. Is it still worth it?
Oh, yeah.
And why?
Oh, man. I think that we'll always be saying like we're still early on in this, because it's just become the norm for business, right? We just moved here to Utah, and I would say 90% of the home things that we bought, whether it's vacuums or couches, are things my wife saw on Instagram. They weren't things that she searched for on Google. We didn't go out to the store to find them. And so it's always going to be relevant. And while it might be slightly harder to get seen, way more people are watching. And so there's always going to be opportunity. And the only wrong way to do it is just by not starting or procrastinating it. Like, the best time to start is right now.
I love it.
Pate, walk us through 2021 was a trajectory altering year for the Smith family as a whole. Would you mind walking us through that year?
Yeah, that year was it was a normal, great year. I was working, life was good. I lived really close to all of my family up there in Idaho, just a few minutes away from my parents and my brother Chandler, who's my best friend, and his wife Maddie, who was my other best friend. And towards the end of the year, I noticed like a lump on my neck, thought it was a tight muscle, kind of went about life as usual, and it continued to get bigger until one day, I decided to go get it checked out. And I went from the urgent care to the radiologist to, they just kept passing me from one doc to another. And within about 2 days, they got back to me after biopsy and told me that I had Hodgkin lymphoma, cancer. And that day I remember really, really vividly. And then after that, it maybe I've blocked it out, and I still don't know if I've worked through all of that in my head. But I remember getting the phone call, and I remember not really feeling any emotion about it. I just was kind of one of those times where you kind of disconnect a little bit and it doesn't feel real. But I remember my wife being super emotional. I remember my parents coming over, and everybody just kind of sat there that night, and everybody cried except for me. I think I still was just pretty disconnected. It was my second son's, it was the day after his first birthday, and then my oldest was 3, so we had 2 young kids. We were wanting to have another baby soon. Felt like I was just rolling with work. My channel was growing, my businesses were growing. I just hired 2 new designers, and that just kind of put a halt on everything. So I ended up coming down here to the Huntsman for scans, and then I was going to start treatment a few weeks after I was diagnosed. And I think the week of my first treatment, my brother Chandler and I were at the golf course because I still was not ready to give up golf yet, although I had to pretty quickly after that. He got a phone call. His wife Maddie had heard back from the doctor that they had found colon cancer after she'd gone in for a colonoscopy, and it just seemed like a really bad joke. Maddie was a few years younger than me. I was at the time 28, and so the fact that both of us had cancer at the same time just seemed like kind of a freak coincidence. So we went through chemo at the same time. We, spent as much time all together as we could, but as chemo went on, it gets more and more brutal to where you don't feel like going out, you don't feel like doing anything. About halfway through, I hit a streak of really bad depression. I was checked out from my family. Didn't care about work. I wasn't answering people's calls or emails. I kind of left my team out to dry, which I still have a lot of guilt from. But I just couldn't hang there. So really just kind of pushed through. It was 6 months of chemo, and what felt like a lifetime. But we went in for my final treatment. I believe it was in March of 2022. We had to wait a few months to see if the treatment worked, and we went in for follow-up scans, and we found out that the cancer was gone. And at that point, it really seemed like things were going to get better, that things were lighter. We immediately kind of rallied around Maddie to help her finish chemo, and her cancer was a lot scarier because the chances of it coming back were a lot higher, and the survival rate of her type of cancer was not nearly as high. And so she finished chemo, and that summer was good. We all were feeling like everything was good, and we had left that behind us. Just a few months after that, we got a call that Maddie's cancer had come back, and that it had come back in a different form that was terminal. And that was a hard few months to see her and Chan battle through that, and their two kids. And I think I felt through that a lot of guilt that I had made it through that, and that I was cancer free, and that hers had come back. And I think I felt a lot of fear from losing her, and fear for how Chan would make it through that, and the kids. And you just have like all these things going through your head. But those last few months and weeks with Maddie were really special with her and Chan and her and the kids. They're amazing. And so I could talk for hours about how difficult that was for them, and how incredible they have been, Chan and the kids, to deal with that. But certainly that was the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life, losing Maddie, but also a really big eye-opening experience, and realizing how unfair life can sometimes be, and also how short it is, and how silly and trivial the things that had seemed like the most important things to me, like how they felt now. I didn't care as much about work or my aspirations to have all these things, or to be seen as super successful, or to prove everybody wrong that didn't believe in me, or like all that stuff seems so silly, because I just wanted to, to be with those people that I loved. And so certainly something that we all are still working through. Like, we miss Maddie like crazy. But I've been surrounded by some really resilient, amazing friends and family. And like I mentioned earlier, they've helped me kind of look for the good things to take out of that experience. And it certainly makes me grateful for my daily routine now and how much it's been altered just because of that experience. And priorities have shifted, and I want to keep them that way.
Thanks for sharing that experience, man. I so much admiration and respect. While you're sharing that experience, it reminded me of so I lost my dad to cancer 2 years ago, and you're talking about gratitude, and it's such a difficult thing for me to understand. Like, in reminding me of this experience where we were. So my dad had brain cancer, and the way that we found out was he had a stroke. And then when he went in to take care of that, they found the brain tumor. And then he couldn't speak. He lost his speech, and he's getting treated. And then it's getting slightly better. And then on his birthday, he had been treating that for about a month. And on his birthday, we had prepared a little cake for him, and then we were going to eat, and there were some snacks, and then we were going to say a prayer, to bless the food. And then he put his hand out and said, and just like indicated that he wanted to do it. So he hadn't spoken in weeks, and he said like 4 words in that prayer, like, Heavenly Father, I'm grateful, amen. And to me, that was like, what are you grateful for? Like, look at everything that's happening right now. And as you're speaking, you remind me of that experience. And I want to ask you that question. Like Steve Jobs said, that you can't connect the dots looking forward, only looking back. Looking back now, what are the greatest lessons that you've had from that experience, and what got you through it? I know it's probably a hard question.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I think one thing is I feel really fortunate to feel like part of this weird community of people that have had cancer or have had family members that have gone through cancer, because it really is a group of people that like genuinely just feel for one another. And I really have seen the goodness in humans, and I think everything around us wants to make us feel like there's just a lot of bad out there, and I think humans are good. Humans genuinely want to do good and be good and love and care for each other, and I definitely have felt that. And the other thing that I won't even use his name, but there's somebody that's always all over my social media, and he says something that just always irks me more than anything else. And he uses it as a positive to say, after you die, nobody's going to think about you. Nobody cares. Nobody knows what you did, what you do, who you were. You're going to be forgotten, and we're all going to move on. And so why does it matter? Why stress? Why worry? And I think the reason that bugs me so much is not a day has gone by, not a single day, where I haven't thought about Maddie and thought about how much we love her and thought about how much she meant to us, and the legacy that she left, and how she has affected the way that I talk with my wife and with my kids, and the way that I just approach every day, and my own struggles, and seeing how she approached her struggles. And so I really, really completely disagree with that idea that once we die, we're gone and forgotten, because I think that if we live our lives the right way, hopefully we can leave just a little bit of good that our kids and our grandkids and their kids can kind of cling on to and remember us by. And I think that affects me every day, is not thinking what legacy I can leave, or not thinking about, what people are going to say about my businesses or my financial success, because those are the things that die. Those are the things that nobody cares about. But I really hope to leave a little bit of the good stuff for my kids. And I'm sure it's the same for you and your dad. You think about them every day, and the impact that they make on us is still so real. And that's what I'm most grateful for coming out of that.
Thank you.
Courtney and I were at the gym this morning, and I said something about Nate and his perspective, and she said, you have lots of people you look up to and admire and want to be like, right? And I was like, yeah, I do. And she's like, I can't think of anyone who I wish I was a mom like them. Like, I think I'm the mom that I want to be, like, to a T. So, and then she thought about it, and she said, really the only mom that I wanted to be like was Maddie. And her impact can't be overstated.
Mm-hmm.
I know exactly where I was when I got the call from Chan that you guys had found out about your cancer, and where I pulled over and where I cried. And I remember exactly where I was in my house when I got the call from Chan about Maddie. And I didn't cry because I thought there's no way this is real. There's no way, like, 27-year-old Payton, 28-year-old Payton, 25-year-old Maddie. Pate, we're grateful for you, bro. I'm wondering if you can, you talked a lot about perspective, insights, prioritization, post-cancer compared to pre-cancer. If you're able to go back to Payton 3 months into chemo and sit across from him, you might be laying down, you might be sitting, what would you say?
After chemo, and for a long time, actually until just recently, I carried a lot of guilt for what I didn't do with my kids, and what I couldn't do with them, and what I couldn't do with my wife, and all that I put her through, and all she had to do alone. And I felt a lot of guilt and shame about the way that I, felt like cancer had beaten me, and I was in such a dark place. And I think coming out of it, I really felt like I had been beaten. And it took a long time for me to realize that I had beaten cancer the same as I feel that Maddie had, with the way that she approached it and fought it and lived till her last day. And it took me a long time to start looking at that time and seeing all the things that I did do, and rather than what I didn't do with the kids. And I couldn't go sledding, and I couldn't go bowling, and I was too tired to read a book with them. It was thinking back to the few times that I could go out and throw snowballs with them, or the times that me and Oliver could look at his search and find book, even though that was the most exhausting thing that I think I had ever done. And every day he wanted to look at this little search and find book where you find these monkeys and sloths. But starting to allow myself to feel good about my efforts through that, and see it as a win, and all the little things that I was able to do when I got out of bed in the morning, that was a win. And when I hugged my wife and kids, that was a win. And so going back and talking to myself halfway through, when I was at my very lowest I've ever been, I would just encourage myself to see all that I had done rather than all I wasn't able to do. And I think that goes for us, whether we're in the middle of the biggest trial of our lives or just our day-to-day, looking at life and saying, look at all the good I did today, and there might have been stuff that I didn't get to today, but that's okay.
I have one more question, unless you have one, Carlos.
I'm good.
So, channeling future Payton 12 months from now. Some people would say that Payton already exists at times, just construct in our minds that you're already there. If you're able to channel future Payton and get advice from him today, what do you think he'd say to you?
If I could talk to my future self, I would need a lot of encouragement to give myself permission to just slow down and be present. I think all of us that that run businesses or that like to do our own thing or that have some occasional ambition, like it's really easy to get really caught up in those things and always focus on where I want to get to. And if you just do the day-to-day, you're going to get there eventually, but why pass up your enjoyment of today because of the anxiety of getting to the next place? And I struggle with that, where I get really wound up about work, or I get wound up about the things that we want to have or that we want to do. Or the last couple of weeks I've just been like so fixed on getting grass laid in our backyard so my kids can have so much fun, and that's the next thing we got to do. And once our grass is here, like, then we can relax. And then those 3 weeks before our grass came in, it was mud fights and sprinkler in the backyard every day with the kids, and it was like the funnest thing ever. And I am really grateful that it took so long to get our grass in. And so just allowing myself to enjoy today, not worry about where I want to get to next, because if I'm doing the right things, that stuff is gonna happen in its own time. And being present is a really hard thing for us as humans, and I'm pretty bad at it, but I want to constantly get better at that. And I think my future self would probably tell me it's not all it's cracked up to be, all this stuff that you wanted and all the ambitions that you have. It didn't bring you any more fulfillment than playing in the mud with your kids. In fact, it was not even a sliver of that joy that you felt.
Pate, this has been amazing, man. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks, guys.
That's a wrap.
You've been watching Hello Grow, the world's #1 growth podcast. I'm Cortland Brady.
I'm Carlos Souza. If you've watched this video so far, it means that you like the content that we're putting out and the people we're interviewing.
We're putting together a community of business leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales leaders. You liking, subscribing, and sharing this content helps us reach those that are going on that journey.
If you want to be a part of this community, please subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on those notifications.